Now, the EFF's planned Monday shutdown has divided South Africans and other civil society organizations. Some of the unions and political parties have pledged their support for the protest, while others are against it. Joining us now is Lindokuhle Vellem from the Defend Our Democracy. Lindokuhle, thank you for making time for us on Newzroom Afrika this afternoon. So you are saying no to the national shutdown?
We're saying no to coercing people to the national shutdown. Don't compel a person to attend or participate in the gathering, because that could be construed as a violent act against humanity, which just crushes their democratic right to not participate. It is a right to participate in the strike, but it's also my constitutional right not to. And the voices of intimidation that have been in the space as the strike was announced has had civil society talking about the man on the street that will lose the income for that day. And so have we exhausted all of the avenues to say that this will bring about the change that we desire? Or is it a moment that will quickly pass and no fundamental change will then happen? Has it been thought out thoroughly? What then happens after the 20th? Will the president step down? Unlikely. Will we get electricity the next day? Unlikely. But what is the plan that is then proposed? How can we work it out without then resorting to the violence and to, yes, not necessarily, it's not that we are saying that there will be violence, but the voices of intimidation, even here at the university level with students on campus, they are told that they will attend the strike. And so it's against those voices that we are saying that the strike, civil society is saying that the strike should not happen. Otherwise, the right to protest is there. And history has proven that great strides can be made by citizens through strike. But we need to have it thought out. We need to have this common enemy that we are going towards together, because now we are on totally different, we are on polar opposites as society. And without bringing that voice together, one day will not make a difference. But we should try to strengthen the bonds between, because clearly now people are speaking about it as middle class and the haves and the have-nots. But now if there's this gap and this chasm that we are not working towards closing, we are never going to reach a conclusion that needs the critical mass to make the change. Yeah.
What do you say to people, Lindokuhle, who will argue that, well, some of these civil rights organizations or NGOs that have signed this letter saying no to people being coerced to this national shutdown are the very same organizations that supported the march against former President Jacob Zuma a couple of years ago when they were calling on him to step down? I know that the context is different in that at the time you didn't have the amount of intimidation that we're seeing now. But to your point, you're saying we need a well thought out strategy on what we are going to achieve with this action. And I would argue that protest is not necessarily supposed to bring about immediate action. When you protest for a president to step down, that doesn't guarantee that he's going to step down tomorrow, but you are sending a message of dissatisfaction, the same message that was sent out when people took to the streets against the former president Jacob Zuma, calling on him to step down.
I get those sentiments, and I think here the difference is the person or the party that is spearheading this action. It's proven that the utterances, we might say that we don't want violence, but at the core of it, there are messages that are embedded within the communication that might spark violence. And here we have quite a volatile situation in that people are hungry, first of all, and seeing a vulnerable marketplace where you are saying that bread for now may satisfy me. Yes, the consensus or the agreement going into the march is that this will be peaceful. But I think civil society at this point in time, there's a concern for the ordinary South African that what will happen in that one day if violence strikes, if lives are lost. And I think that South Africa, we don't care much about human life. It's the utterances of we are not scared of anything, be it Marikana, sorry. We are going ahead, and that speaks of there will be casualties at the end because we are not afraid of anything. But if in this case the state does what it needs to, yes, people are worried about the capacity of the state should violence unfold. But at the same time, there is a constitutional right to proceed with the march. So striking a balance between the leader of this march and the history that precedes them, and then coming to a point where you then say, no, we trust that this will be a peaceful march.
So how do we strike the balance then? How do we strike the balance? Because I imagine it wouldn't pass constitutional muster to say, oh, because 3 years ago when you were protesting or marching, there were some elements of violence, therefore we are curtailing your right to march or to protest. You still have a right to protest. So how do we strike a balance so that we do not limit people's right to protest, which is so sacrosanct in our constitutional democracy, but at the same time, we make sure that we've got plans in place to respond should there be violence? Because I think we will get to a point where that can actually be used by the police. So you want to try and avoid a precedent where the police can just one day come out and say, well, Lindokuhle and Clement, you are not going to protest because we foresee potential violence and therefore we are curtailing your right to protest based on that, what we are forecasting.
I think for this upcoming march, we might be a bit late. But I think the fundamental thing is to start with civic education. I think we hear there are so many steps that one can take. Firstly, it starts with your vote. And then it's holding those that you have voted for accountable. So if we can strengthen that knowledge, we can get to a point where by the time we get to marches, people know exactly why they are there. And so I'm not saying that it's going to be a violent march, but we can't also be sure that then the courts at the same time, we need to guard against the Constitution not working for us. There are so many steps within our democracy that we are possibly skipping as a mass. And then running towards a march.
All right. Lindokuhle Vellem from Defend Our Democracy, thank you for having a conversation with us this afternoon.